The human fleet was outnumbered, cornered, and losing hope. For years, they had fought against the Xantor, a species with weapons so powerful and advanced that it seemed impossible for the humans to win. One by one, their colonies fell, their cities burned, and their brave soldiers died in the chaos of battle. There was no place left to run. Earth had been destroyed long ago. And now, all that remained of humanity was a fleet of ships that barely survived the constant onslaught. Their ships were small, old, and lacking the advanced technology of their enemies, but they were all humanity had left. On a small forgotten world in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, the last human fleet prepared for their final stand. The Xantor were closing in. Their massive warships, like great metal beasts, glided silently through the darkness of space. They were relentless, showing no mercy, and the humans could do nothing but fight back with what little they had. The odds were stacked against them, but they couldn't give up. This was it, their last chance to save what was left of their kind. The commander of the human fleet, Admiral Aiden Gray, stood alone on the bridge of his flagship. His face was tired, marked with the weight of years of war. His uniform, once crisp and neat, was now worn and ragged. He looked out the window of his ship, staring into the vast emptiness of space. The stars seemed so distant now, almost as if they were mocking him. His fingers brushed over the map of their position, but he knew the truth. There was no way they could win. Not like this. Not with the Xantor's overwhelming might. "Admiral, the enemy is approaching," said Lieutenant Carla Moore, her voice calm but tinged with fear. She stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. Aiden's lips tightened, but he didn't answer right away. His mind raced, searching for a miracle, something to give them even the slightest chance. But deep down, he knew there was no miracle coming. The enemy was too strong. "All ships, prepare for battle," he ordered, his voice steady despite the storm inside. He wasn't sure if it was for his crew's sake or his own that he stayed calm, but he had been a leader long enough to know that panic would destroy them faster than any enemy ever could. As the human fleet made its final preparations, the Xantor ships appeared on the horizon. They were massive dark silhouettes against the stars, their engines burning with a bright, menacing glow. They were here to finish what they had started. They were here to wipe out the last remnants of humanity. The first volley of enemy fire tore through the black void, crashing into the human ships. The blasts were powerful, ripping through the outer hulls with ease, sending debris spiraling into space. Aiden gritted his teeth and watched as his fleet began to return fire. They knew it was hopeless, but they had no choice but to fight. They'd fought because they had always fought. They fought because it was in their blood. The human ships fired their old, outdated weapons, their lasers weak against the enemy's shields. But they fought with everything they had. Every shot, every maneuver, was a desperate attempt to stay alive just a little longer. Aiden watched his ships go down one by one, their lights flickering out in the cold darkness of space. His heart sank with every loss, but there was no time for grief. Not now. He stood on the bridge, surrounded by chaos, but his mind was focused. The Xantor were relentless, yes, but they weren't invincible. If they could just hold on a little longer, if they could just find a way to survive, maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide. Suddenly, a strange signal flashed across the communication panel. Aiden's eyes narrowed. It wasn't a human signal, but it wasn't Xantor either. It was coming from deep space, from a region they hadn't explored before. "Lieutenant Moore, what's that signal?" Aiden asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and caution. "I don't know, sir. It's strange. I've never seen anything like it. It's definitely not a distress signal, but it's like a beacon of some kind." Aiden stared at the screen, his heart beating faster. Could this be some sort of help? Another human fleet, maybe. It seemed impossible, but they had no other options. He grabbed the microphone. "This is Admiral Gray of the human fleet. If there is anyone out there, We need assistance. We are being overwhelmed by the Xantor. I repeat, we need help. Now, there was no immediate response. The silence was deafening. But just as he was about to turn away, a voice crackled through the static, low and distorted, but unmistakable. We are coming. Stay strong. Aiden's pulse quickened. The voice sounded human, but it was distant, almost as if it were coming from another time or place. Was it a trap? Was it one last desperate hope? Or was this some kind of miracle? The human fleet continued to fight, but Aiden's mind was now split between the battle at hand and the mysterious signal. Could help really be on the way? Who was it that sent that message? He didn't have time to think about it. The Xantor were closing in fast. Then, just as everything seemed lost, something impossible happened. From the darkness of deep space, a massive fleet of ships emerged. They were unlike anything Aiden had ever seen. Their designs were sleek, advanced, far beyond anything humanity had ever built. There were hundreds of them, each ship bigger and more powerful than anything the humans had at their disposal. They appeared out of nowhere, like a dream or a vision. Their weapons fired with precision, and the Xantor were forced to retreat. The Xantor fleet, once so dominant, faltered in the face of this new, unknown force. They didn't retreat in fear, but they seemed confused. What was this fleet? Where had it come from? Aiden's mouth went dry. It was impossible. He had no idea who these ships were or how they had arrived. But one thing was clear. They had just saved humanity from total destruction. "Admiral, what should we do?" Lieutenant Moore asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Aiden didn't know how to respond. There was no logical explanation for what had just happened. All he could do was look out at the new fleet, his eyes wide with awe and wonder. Were these ships humanity's future, or were they something else entirely? He didn't have time to think about it. For now, they had been saved. But the real question was, who were these mysterious ships? And could they be trusted? As the battle raged on, Aiden knew one thing for sure. Humanity's fight was far from over. But for the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected force could be the answer they had been searching for all along. The fight wasn't over. But now, humanity had a chance. The Xantor ships were in full retreat, their dark silhouettes vanishing into the void of space, but the battle was far from over. The mysterious fleet that had appeared out of nowhere continued to engage the enemy, their powerful weapons tearing through the Xantor warships with surgical precision. The humans aboard their last ships watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. For the first time in years, there was hope in their hearts. Admiral Aiden Gray, still on the bridge of his flagship, couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. The unknown fleet moved with incredible coordination, as though they had been fighting together for decades. The way they engaged the Xantor was unlike anything he had seen before. They were efficient, calculated, and relentless. The Xantor, once so confident, were now scrambling, their mighty ships turning and weaving in an attempt to evade the oncoming fire. "Sir, they're outnumbering the Xantor now," Lieutenant Moore said, her voice barely above a whisper. She was too stunned to speak loudly. Aiden nodded, still staring at the battle unfolding in front of him. "Keep me updated on our fleet's status," he said, his voice firm. The truth was, he didn't know what to make of these new allies. Where had they come from? What were their intentions? He had no answers, only questions. But one thing was clear. Humanity's survival was tied to these mysterious ships, whether they liked it or not. The human fleet, battered and broken, followed in the wake of the unknown fleet, firing sporadically at any remaining Xantor ships. Their weapons were no match for the power of the newcomers, but they still fought, driven by a need to survive. Aiden watched as the last few remaining Xantor ships retreated into the depths of space, leaving the battlefield eerily silent. "Is it over?" Moore asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Aiden shook his head slowly. "I don't know. We still don't understand who they are. As the final Xantor ship disappeared into the distance, the unknown fleet came to a halt. They didn't advance, nor did they retreat. They hovered, waiting. Aiden felt the tension rise as he realized that this was the moment that could change everything. Suddenly, a signal burst across the communication panel. The voice was familiar, but the words were not what he expected. "This is Admiral Seraphim of the Earth Fleet, reporting to Commander Gray. We have successfully repelled the enemy forces, awaiting orders." Aiden's heart skipped a beat. Earth Fleet. But Earth had been destroyed, hadn't it? It had been destroyed decades ago, long before he was even born. His mind raced as he tried to process what he was hearing. Could this be some kind of trick? "Admiral Seraphim," Aiden said, his voice trembling slightly. You're from Earth." "Yes," the voice replied, calm and certain. "We are humanity's future, and we have come to help." The words hit Aiden like a punch to the stomach. Humanity's future, but how? His mind struggled to make sense of the situation. Was this some kind of time travel? Was this fleet from a future where humanity had survived, and now they had come back to save their ancestors? "Who are you?" Aiden asked, trying to steady his breathing. Where did you come from?" The voice of Admiral Seraphim answered, but this time there was a hint of sadness in it. "We are from a future where humanity almost destroyed itself. We found a way to travel back in time, to help you before it's too late. But you must understand, Commander, this is not without consequences. We have altered the timeline by coming here." Aiden's mind spun with the weight of the words. Time travel. Could it really be true? Was this fleet from a future that had somehow managed to defeat the Xantor and come back to save humanity? It was almost too much to comprehend. "You're saying you're from the future?" Aiden asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "But why us? Why now?" There was a long pause before Admiral Seraphim replied. "Because you are the last hope of humanity. If we had not intervened, you would have fallen to the Xantor. We are your future, and we are here to ensure you survive." Aiden was silent for a moment, the weight of this revelation sinking in. Humanity's future. The fleet before him had come from that future. He looked out the window, the vastness of space stretching out before him. The Xantor were gone for now, but there was so much more to this story than he could understand. "Admiral Gray," Admiral Seraphim's voice crackled again. "We know this is a lot to process, but we cannot stay. We must return to our time. However, we leave you with the knowledge and the power to rebuild. You have the opportunity to change the course of history. Use it wisely." Aiden's heart raced. This was humanity's chance, perhaps their only chance. He wasn't sure what the future held, or if the timeline would be altered beyond recognition, but he knew one thing. They had been given a second chance at life, and he couldn't let it slip away. "I understand," Aiden said, his voice steady now. "Thank you. We won't waste this chance." As the communication link cut off, Aiden stood silently, his gaze fixed on the stars. He could see the Xantor ships in the distance, retreating, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win this war. The mysterious fleet had given them a chance, and he would make sure they didn't waste it. Turning to his crew, Aiden gave the order. "Prepare to follow the Earth fleet. We have a future to save." As his fleet moved forward, he couldn't help but wonder what awaited them. But no matter what the future held, they were not alone anymore. The unknown fleet had given them hope, and for the first time in a long time, that hope felt real. And so, with the stars above and the unknown ahead, humanity's fight was far from over. But now they had the strength and the knowledge to survive. With the help of their mysterious allies, they would rebuild. And this time, they would win. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. As the remnants of the Xantor fleet retreated into the dark expanse of space, the human fleet, battered but alive, followed the mysterious Earth fleet. For the first time in years, the humans dared to hope. Admiral Aiden Gray stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the massive ships ahead. These new allies, the Earth fleet, had saved them from certain extinction, but Aiden knew they couldn't afford to get too comfortable. They had won one battle, but the Xantor were still out there, still hunting humanity, and the timeline of the galaxy was now in flux. Admiral Gray, Lieutenant Moore's voice broke through Aiden's thoughts. She was standing by his side, scanning the data coming in from the unknown fleet. We've been following them for hours, but they haven't given us any more information. Are we supposed to just follow them blindly? Aiden turned his attention to her. I don't know, he admitted, but right now, we have no choice. They're our best shot. They both looked out at the fleet ahead. The ships were powerful, undeniably so, but there was something unsettling about them. The technology they used was beyond anything humanity had developed, and they had no idea who or what these people really were. The fleet moved with a level of coordination and precision that made it clear they had fought in many wars and won many battles, but they had never explained where they had come from or why they had come to help. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission, Lieutenant Moore said, her voice crackling with static. She turned to face the console, then looked back at Aiden. It's from the Earth fleet. Aiden's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected to hear from them again so soon. Put it through, he ordered. The image that appeared on the screen was of a tall, imposing figure in a dark military uniform. The face was serious, almost cold, but the eyes revealed a hint of compassion. The person spoke, and Aiden immediately recognized the voice from earlier. This is Admiral Seraphim, the figure said. We are nearing our destination. Once we arrive, we will explain everything. The future of humanity depends on your ability to understand what has happened and what you must do to survive. Aiden leaned forward. What do you mean by what we must do to survive? We've just won. The Xantor are retreating. Admiral Seraphim's expression remained unreadable. The Xantor are only the beginning. There are others. You must prepare for a war that spans more than just your galaxy. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and foreboding. Aiden felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? What kind of war? A war on a scale you can't even begin to comprehend, Seraphim replied. This is not just a fight for survival. It is a fight for the future of the galaxy, a fight that you are now part of. We will explain when we arrive. For now, stay with us, Commander. You have much to learn. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Aiden and the crew in silence. He looked at Lieutenant Moore, who was staring at the screen, just as confused as he was. What do you think they meant? She asked, her voice soft with uncertainty. Aiden didn't answer immediately. He was still processing what Seraphim had said. Another war. A fight for the future of the galaxy. It didn't make sense. The Xantor had been their greatest threat, and now they were retreating. There was no indication that anything worse was coming. But there was something in Seraphim's tone that made Aiden uneasy. The Admiral had spoken with such conviction, as though this war, whatever it was inevitable. Aiden had a sinking feeling that they were walking straight into a larger conflict, one that could change everything. But for now, there was nothing they could do but follow and hope they were prepared for whatever came next. The journey continued, the two fleets traveling together in silence. As they neared their destination, Aiden tried to piece together what little information he had. Who were these future humans? How had they come to exist? And why had they chosen to come back and help humanity in its darkest hour? He couldn't shake the questions, but the answers still eluded him. The Earth fleet's ships were silent, their hulls gleaming in the starlight. They didn't seem to be in any hurry, as if they were simply waiting for something to happen. Aiden didn't know if they were waiting for a signal, a message, or if they were simply preparing for the next phase of whatever plan they had in store. Hours passed, and finally they arrived at their destination. It was a vast space station, one that stretched for miles across the void. It was unlike anything Aiden had ever seen before. The design was sleek and futuristic, with shimmering metal and glowing lights that pulsed with energy. The station was enormous, its structure a maze of corridors and chambers that seemed to stretch into infinity. "Welcome to the Nexus," Admiral Seraphim's voice crackled over the comms. "This is where we will begin our work. This is where we will prepare for the war to come." Aiden felt a shiver of awe and fear. The Nexus was unlike any station humanity had ever built. The size alone was overwhelming. The possibilities and dangers seemed endless. As the ships docked, Aiden's crew was instructed to disembark and follow a group of soldiers from the Earth fleet. They were led through a series of narrow hallways and into a large chamber at the heart of the Nexus. Inside, a group of high-ranking officers was waiting for them. These officers, all wearing the same dark uniforms as Admiral Seraphim, looked at Aiden with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Commander Gray, welcome," one of them said, stepping forward. "We are the ones who will guide you through the next phase of humanity's survival." Aiden nodded, trying to steady his nerves. "What is all this? Why are we here?" The officer exchanged a glance with the others before speaking. "You are here because the fate of humanity is now in your hands. You've seen the Xantor, but they are not the only threat. There are greater forces in the galaxy, forces that seek to control everything. We have come back to prepare you for that fight." Aiden's mind raced. Greater forces, forces that sought to control everything. He had no idea what they were talking about, but one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. Whatever they were about to face, humanity was no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for something much bigger. "Let's begin," the officer said, turning to lead them further into the station. There is much to learn, and very little time. As Aiden followed them into the heart of the Nexus, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far beyond their understanding. The Earth fleet had given them hope, but with it came the heavy burden of responsibility. The future was no longer just something to worry about. It was something they had to fight for. And Aiden knew that the war they had just won was only a small part of the greater battle ahead. As the human fleet settled into the Nexus, the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on Admiral Aiden Gray's shoulders. They had come to the heart of the Earth fleet's operation, but the true nature of the threat still remained unclear. The massive station, stretching out in every direction, seemed to hum with a quiet yet ominous energy. Aiden could feel the pulse of something greater here, something far beyond the fight for survival they had known up until now. The officers from the Earth fleet led Aiden and his crew down long, sterile hallways. The walls were lined with strange technology that flickered in patterns Aiden didn't understand. There were no windows, only the unyielding metallic walls stretching endlessly in every direction. They passed other groups of soldiers, some human, some not, but all of them exuded a sense of purpose, of preparation. The atmosphere was thick with the feeling that something monumental was about to unfold. Finally, they arrived at a large, circular room at the center of the station. It was unlike anything Aiden had seen before. The room was filled with holographic displays, glowing consoles, and high-tech equipment that seemed to hum with life. In the middle of the room stood a long round table, around which several figures were seated. They were all dressed in dark uniforms, similar to Admiral Seraphim's, their faces stern, their eyes sharp. These were the leaders of the Earth fleet, the ones who had come from the future to guide humanity through the coming storm. "Commander Gray, welcome," Admiral Seraphim said, standing from his seat at the head of the table. His voice was calm, yet filled with an undeniable authority. "We've been waiting for you." Aiden didn't know how to respond. "Waiting for me?" "Yes," Seraphim replied, his gaze steady. "We knew that the Xantor would push humanity to the edge of extinction, but we also knew that it would take more than just defeating them to ensure humanity's survival. You are the key to what comes next." Aiden's mind raced. "I don't understand. We've just defeated the Xantor. Isn't that the end of the war? Seraphim shook his head. No, Commander. The Xantor are only one part of a much larger, more dangerous conflict. The galaxy is home to more than just the Xantor. There are ancient forces, entities older than the stars themselves, that are locked in a battle for dominance. The Xantor were merely the first wave. There are others, far more powerful, that will come next. Aiden's heart sank. He had known that the galaxy wasn't a safe place, but this was something else entirely. And you want us to fight these forces? We're not asking you to fight, Commander, Admiral Seraphim explained. We're asking you to lead. You and your people have something that these ancient beings don't. You have hope. You have the will to survive and the ability to adapt. We've seen it in your history. It's what sets you apart from every other species in the galaxy. Aiden didn't know what to say. He had always believed humanity's greatest strength was its resilience. But this was something much greater than anything they had faced before. Who are these forces? Aiden asked, his voice barely a whisper. And what do they want with us? Seraphim's face darkened. They are the Keepers, ancient beings who have ruled over the galaxy for eons. They'd watched civilizations rise and fall, all in the pursuit of control. They are beings of unimaginable power, capable of bending reality to their will. And they want what humanity has, the ability to change, to evolve, to adapt. A cold shiver ran down Aiden's spine. He could barely wrap his mind around what Seraphim was saying. These Keepers were not just a threat. They were a force beyond comprehension. But why would they want humanity? Why would they care about a species so young and untested in the grand scheme of things? The Keepers want to assimilate humanity into their control. Seraphim continued, his voice grim. They want your potential, your ability to change, to grow. In the past, they have absorbed civilizations, using them to fuel their own power. But they never encountered a species like yours. You fight, you adapt, and most importantly, you survive. That is why we have come back to this time, to help you prepare for the coming war. Aiden absorbed the words, each one heavier than the last. He glanced around the room at the other officers. Some of them looked as if they had seen the devastation of these Keepers firsthand. They knew the cost of their existence, and it was written in their eyes. The loss, the destruction, the endless cycle of war. Then what do we do? Aiden asked, trying to steady his nerves. How do we stop them? We don't stop them. Seraphim replied, his voice firm. We fight them. We take the fight to their doorstep. We show them that humanity is not something to be controlled or absorbed. We show them that humanity is a force of its own, but we cannot do it alone. That's why we need you, Commander. You and your fleet are the key to unlocking humanity's full potential. You have the power to unite others, to form alliances, to create a resistance strong enough to challenge the Keepers. Aiden stood still, absorbing the weight of Seraphim's words. A resistance, to fight ancient beings who could bend reality itself. It felt impossible, yet he knew, deep down, that this was their only choice. There was no other option but to fight. I understand, Aiden said, his voice steady, but his heart pounding in his chest. What do we need to do? Seraphim nodded, and the officers around the table began to activate the consoles in front of them. Holographic maps and data streams appeared, showing the vast stretches of space where the Keepers had already begun to take root. The galaxy was in danger, more than it had ever been before. We have already begun to gather resources, Seraphim explained. We have ships, weapons, technology that you cannot even begin to comprehend. But we need your leadership to guide us. You must be the one to unite the factions of the galaxy, humanity's allies, the species that still stand against the Keepers, and those who may be reluctant to join the fight. Aiden nodded slowly, his mind already working through the logistics of what needed to be done. We'll need a fleet, a strong one, and we'll need to move quickly. The Keepers won't wait for us to get ready. They won't, Seraphim agreed. which is why we're preparing you now. You'll begin training with our officers, learning the tactics and strategies we've used to fight the Keepers. We'll arm your fleet with the best technology we have." Aiden looked around the room again, at the officers who were already gathering information, preparing the first steps of this new war. They were serious, determined, and ready for whatever came next. "Let's get started," Aiden said. His voice was calm, but his mind was racing. This was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a fight for the future of humanity. And now, he understood what it meant to truly lead. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity would stand against the Keepers, no matter what it took. They would not be absorbed. They would not be controlled. And they would fight for their right to survive. The weight of the responsibility hung heavy on Admiral Aiden Gray's shoulders as he stood in the center of the command room, the vast expanse of the galaxy displayed on the holoscreens around him. The Earth fleet had begun their preparations, assembling everything needed for the war ahead. But this wasn't a war like any Aiden had fought before. It wasn't just against the Xantor or any single enemy. They were preparing for a war against ancient beings, the Keepers, whose power defied all comprehension. A force older than the stars themselves, bent on absorbing and controlling everything in their path. Aiden had never felt more out of his depth. He had been a soldier, a commander, but this was something beyond his experience. He had never had to face an enemy that could alter reality, that could bend the fabric of space and time to their will. Yet here they were, standing on the precipice of a battle unlike any humanity had ever seen. As the Earth fleet's commanders and officers worked tirelessly around him, Aiden tried to focus. His mind raced through the impossible task ahead. How were they supposed to stand against creatures that could twist the very laws of nature? How were they supposed to win a war when the enemy could erase their existence with a thought? "Commander Gray," a voice broke through his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Moore, her face serious as she approached him. "We've received a message from the rest of the human fleet. They're ready to engage. We're just waiting for your orders." Aiden nodded, pulling himself from his inner turmoil. This was the moment they had all been preparing for. "Tell them to stand by. We're not moving until we've got a plan." The room fell into a tense silence as the crew worked around him, going through their final checks and strategies. Aiden's gaze drifted to the holographic map that displayed the galaxy, showing the spread of the Keepers' influence, their reach. It was horrifying. Vast swaths of space now controlled by these entities, with more territories falling under their control each day. The map was a network of red lines that seemed to engulf everything in its path. "I don't know if we can win this, Lieutenant," Aiden murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "We can't afford to think like that, sir," Moore replied, her voice steady but tinged with the same uncertainty that Aiden felt. "We've come this far, and we got the support we need. The Earth fleet is stronger than we ever imagined, and we've got a chance, just one, but we have to take it." Aiden stared at her for a moment, then nodded. She was right. Humanity had always been at its best when faced with impossible odds. It was their greatest strength, resilience, determination, and the unyielding belief that no matter how dark things got, they could fight through it. He couldn't let doubt consume him now, not when they were so close to their goal. "All right," he said, his voice firm now. "Prepare the fleet. We're going after the Keepers." As the orders were relayed and the fleet mobilized, Aiden felt a momentary flicker of hope. They had a chance. Small, fragile, but a chance. That was all they needed. The Earth fleet, now joined by the human forces, readied itself for the fight ahead. Their combined strength was something to behold. Ships of unimaginable power, sleek and deadly, armed with the most advanced technology humanity could muster. But even with this might, Aiden knew it wouldn't be enough to win on strength alone. This fight would require more than just firepower. They would need to outthink and outmaneuver the Keepers, who had millennia of experience in controlling and dominating civilizations. It would take everything they had. The fleet moved out from the Nexus station, cutting through the vast emptiness of space. The hum of the engines, the steady rhythm of the commands being passed, filled the ship with a tense energy. Aiden stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes scanning the screens, his mind working through every possible scenario. The Keepers were somewhere ahead, lurking in the shadows, waiting for them to make the first move. As the fleet ventured deeper into enemy territory, a sudden signal interrupted their progress. It was a distorted transmission, one that echoed with strange otherworldly sounds. A cold chill ran down Aiden's spine. This was the first direct communication they had received from the Keepers. The voice that came through the comms was unsettling, low, monotone, as if it came from the varied void of space itself. Humanity, you have come to your end. Aiden's grip on the console tightened, his heart pounding. The voice of the Keepers was chilling, devoid of emotion, like an ancient predator sizing up its prey. You cannot win this war. You will be absorbed. All you have fought for will be erased. We will never surrender, Aiden said, his voice unwavering. We fight for our survival, and we will fight until the very end. The voice of the Keepers seemed to laugh, though it was devoid of any warmth. Survival, you are already lost. There is no place for you in this universe. Your resistance is futile. All that is left is the inevitable. Not while we still draw breath. Aiden responded, his voice growing stronger. The transmission cut off abruptly, and the bridge fell silent. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Aiden could feel the weight of the Keepers' words, but he wouldn't let fear take root. The Keepers wanted them to feel helpless, to believe that defeat was inevitable. But Aiden had seen what humanity could do in the face of impossible odds. They had survived countless battles, and they would survive this one too. We're moving out, Aiden ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. Prepare for battle. The fleet moved forward, the immense power of the Earth fleet's ships rippling through space. Their weapons were charged, ready to fire. But even as they approached the Keeper's stronghold, Aiden knew that the true battle wasn't just one of strength. It was a battle of wills, and humanity was not going to be easily defeated. The first salvo of energy blasts erupted across the void as the fleet engaged the Keeper's forces. The Earth fleet's weapons lit up the darkness, cutting through the silence of space with devastating force. The Keeper's ships, vast and ancient, retaliated with terrifying speed and power. Their ships were unlike anything the humans had ever seen, massive, ethereal, seemingly existing in multiple dimensions at once. But the humans didn't hesitate. They fought back with everything they had, their weapons crackling with energy, their ships maneuvering through the battlefield with precision. Aiden stood at the heart of the command center, his eyes locked on the screen as explosions rippled across the void. The space around him was alive with the fury of battle, the clash of civilizations, the war for humanity's future. Every shot, every move, was a testament to humanity's determination to survive. The battle raged on, with each side gaining and losing ground in a relentless cycle. The Keepers were powerful, but humanity had something they didn't: the will to keep fighting, no matter the cost. As the battle stretched on, Aiden could feel the resolve of his crew, the strength of every person in the fleet. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the very soul of humanity. And as the final waves of battle rage, with explosions filling the void, Aiden felt one thing for certain. No matter the outcome, humanity would never bow to the will of the Keepers. They would fight, they would adapt, and they would survive. And if they could not defeat the Keepers now, they would come back stronger. Because that was what humanity did. They never gave up. They never stopped fighting.